So what is it with cyclists? A friend of mine's son, who lives in New York, got caught jumping a red light for the second time, and he's now gone to court. And what amazes me about this story is that I had a chat with him. He's so arrogant about it. It was unbelievable. And because he's trying to fight it through court rather than paying the fine. And I said to him, why are you trying to fight it? You did it, didn't you? You jumped through. Yeah. He went, yeah. And? I said, yeah, but you did it. Therefore, why don't you pay the fine? Well, because, if you fight it, you might get off with it. Yes, but you did break the law. I'll do it all the time. I just happened to get caught that time. And that's the kind of arrogance that absolutely, it just defeats me. I cannot understand it. This whole, I got away with it, why should I? Why should I? Why shouldn't I? I'm allowed to, why shouldn't I? No, you're not allowed to, actually. That's the problem. So maybe we need to see more prosecutions of cyclists in this town. Maybe we need to do that. The cars, of course, are easily traceable. We're easy to spot. Cyclists are not. And while they weave around, I'm not saying that anybody deserves to be hit by a car, not by any stretch of the imagination. And certainly what happened to me, I was just standing there. I wasn't doing anything. But cyclists have got to take more responsibility, haven't they? They've got to understand that they are small and that they can't be seen. And that while they weave around and cycle in the wrong places and cycle on pavements and expect never to have to stop, there will be problems. Is that the arrogance that goes with cyclists? Or is it the arrogance of drivers? Is there too much of a battle for us to share nicely, as my mother used to say? 0845 6060 973 and text 84850. Well, joining me now is Andreas Kambanis, who's from the London cyclists.co.uk. Hello, Andreas.
Hi there.
Hi there. Another tragedy on our streets. Like I said, I don't want to talk about the death of Gary Mason, particularly because we don't know the reasons for it yet. But we do have a problem on London's roads.
Yes, well, that is the case. Basically, there's not been that much investment in cycling in recent times. And you've got a situation of where we're at today where, unfortunately, events like this do occur, and you are hearing about it, occasionally. But in general, cycling in London is a fairly safe activity. It's more likely to extend your life as opposed to shorten it.
Yeah, well, yes, but cyclists themselves have to, as I was just saying, have to take some responsibility for their behaviour on the roads. Do you not agree?
Yes, I would agree with that, definitely. I think, unfortunately, you do see sort of a very small percentage of cyclists, going through red lights, etc., and it doesn't create a great image for cycling, but that really isn't the majority of cyclists. I mean, most cyclists that I speak to will say, it's just as annoying for us when we see someone, going through lights.
But I can tell you now that the anecdotal evidence that I'll be hearing this afternoon will be not of a tiny, small minority of cyclists behaving badly, but a large percentage of those that we see behaving badly, so that they don't add up.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I mean, I guess the ones that you notice are going to be the ones that go through red light. You're probably not going to notice one that's sort of stood there obeying the rules of the road.
No, I would. If I saw a cyclist obeying the rules of the road, I'd notice. I tell you.
Well, I can speak for myself, and I can say that I hardly ever go through a red light. I mean, I think there's definitely that sort of arrogance that you were speaking about, but you do have to remember that is a small percentage of road users, and unfortunately, they're kind of spoiling it for everyone. A cyclist is in a dangerous position at a traffic light, and there is a fear there because you're sort of stood in front of maybe a heavy goods vehicle, etc., and you're on a tiny bicycle. And I think that's where the temptation comes in to just pop through the red light. But unfortunately, we've got to stick to the road rules like every other user, and I would discourage anyone from doing that, definitely.
Do you see, as we get more and more cyclists on the road, do you see a reason for us having a small amount of insurance, some responsibility on cyclists, number plates, identification, some way of being able to report? But I mean, because if we can knock the bad behaviour off, then we don't need to knock the cyclists off. Do you know what I mean? If we start to say, right, I saw this person jump this light, they get a fine, they don't do it again, and we start to see behaviour change. There's no reason why cyclists should change their behaviour.
Yes, unfortunately, if you start to try and regulate cycling, you start to discourage people from undertaking it. And with the current situation, and London's already falling behind fellow European cities in cycling use. And if you start to, impose things such as license plates for cyclists and so forth, you're only going to discourage new people from joining. And it is a good solution to the huge congestion problem that we have here in London. It's a very pollution-free way to travel around compared to, being stuck in a car in traffic.
But why would it discourage? I wouldn't mind having to license my bike.
Well, for example, in Australia, where they introduced a rule where every cyclist has to wear a helmet, they saw that the cycling use dropped significantly, and it hasn't recovered since then. It's a matter of the joy of cycling is that you can pick up a bike and head off and do it straight away. You start trying to tax it and encourage people to have license plates and so forth. You're really starting to complicate the process, and anything that's going to discourage cycling, I think, is really going to be very bad for London.
But we need to discourage illegal cycling, and there's nothing. I could get onto a bike now and do whatever I wanted to whoever I wanted to, whenever I wanted to, however I wanted to, and really just go, do you know what, I don't care, because no one can report me because I don't know who I am. I mean, and that is an arrogance that we're seeing. We're seeing cyclists on blooming mobile phones, Andreas. I see cyclists more often than not with headphones in. What are they doing?
What you've got to remember is that if a cyclist goes through a red light, the implications for fellow road users are far less than if a car goes through a red light. Now, the number of deaths caused by a cyclist, bumping into a pedestrian and so forth, I believe it's about, I think in London there was one death in the past 10 years or so, whereas the death by cars going through a red light is obviously a far more bigger. So you've got to remember that, yes, whilst not obeying the road rules is definitely not a behaviour to be encouraged, the knock-on effect to fellow road users and pedestrians and so forth is definitely not as great. And there is a large percentage of the budget that is being allocated to cycling, and it is a tiny amount of the transport budget that goes to cycling, is spent on enforcement against cyclists. But the problem is that with the lack of dedicated cycling infrastructure and so forth in London, I think you're going to see these problems.
But with respect, Andreas, you didn't answer my question about those cyclists who are constantly listening to something of obviously great importance on their MP3 players, and they can't hear the traffic. I mean, I noticed even today, walking with my hood up on my new coat, that I was unaware of traffic, and that is not even with headphones in. So if I'm on a bike and I've got headphones in, I'm a liability to myself and to everybody else.
Yes, definitely. Well, I mean, absolutely. I would discourage any cyclist from cycling around. And as cyclists, we have a responsibility to be safe on the road. And that's why I encourage anybody that feels unsafe cycling in London to undertake cycle training. And then you learn things such as never overtake a heavy goods vehicle on the inside, never cycle on the pavement, and so forth. Never
be on your mobile phone.
Yes, never be on your mobile phone, of course. There's no way I would encourage behaviour like that, absolutely.
Andreas, thank you very much indeed for joining me this afternoon. Andreas Cambanis there from londoncyclists.co.uk. Good place to go if you want some advice. 0845 6060 973 and text 84850. What can we do? I mean, I'm sitting here blaming cyclists quite a lot, so if you're a cyclist, call. I'd love to hear from you. Joe is in Barnes. Hello, Joe.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello. What do you think of this?
I think the jar driver